meeting shall come to order at 6:05, please. Would you call the roll, Kathy?
Adams.
Here.
Jones.
Here.
Sefrati. Jackson.
Here.
Brownlee.
Here.
Trojansky.
Here.
Agee.
Here.
Albers.
Here. May I have a motion to temporarily adjourn the meeting to move into executive session for the purpose of a discussion,
So moved.
planning and, excuse me one minute, planning and zoning personnel.
So moved.
A second, please.
Second.
Second.
Okay, call roll.
Adams.
Here.
Jones. Yes. Jackson.
Yes.
Brownlee.
Yes.
Trojansky.
Yes.
Agee.
Yes. Okay.
That's Alex's.
We will go into the little round table room for executive session. May I have a motion to resume the regular council meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Call the roll, please.
Adams.
Here.
Jones.
Yes.
Jackson.
Yes.
Brownlee.
Yes.
Trojansky.
Yes.
Agee.
Yes. Okay.
Yes. Well, if you want, yeah, Albers then.
Yes.
But usually I don't.
Yes. Okay. This evening we have two presentations. Hopefully we have residents that are interested as well. And our first presentation is Mr. Fred Carmen of Newport Square. Mr. Carmen is?
I'm here.
Oh, good. Good. Welcome. You're welcome. You can come up to the podium if you'd like and use the microphone.
Thank you very much. We appreciate the opportunity to be here this evening. I want to introduce to you Jonathan Burns. Jonathan is a partner in Newport Square as well. And we have our assistant Jennifer and Cameron, who is also our special projects coordinator. We appreciate.
Would you like to speak into the
Sure,
mic?
I'm sorry.
We pick it all up.
We will. Appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight. This is actually a project that we have been working on within the city for some time, although I'm led to believe that it's relatively new in your consciousness. So let me start back at the beginning a little bit and tell you a bit about Newport Square. We put some books in front of you which tell a little bit of a pictorial story of where the first Newport Square came from. There's a Newport Square in Warrensville Heights. And I'm going to let Jonathan talk a little bit about that because he was intimately involved in that, and then we'll pick up from there.
Good evening. Thank you for having us. Newport Square was a concept that was developed really in concert with the city of Warrensville Heights, Congressman, now Congressman Marshall Fudge, and then Congresswoman Stephanie Tubbs Jones. It recognized a need in the inner ring communities to have the older population age in place, and there wasn't a place for them to go. Most of these residents are the fabric of the community. They're the people who show up to council meetings. They're the people who are involved in the churches. They're the people who've been involved in the schools. They're really an important part of the community, and unfortunately, as they aged, there was nowhere for them to go. They could either go into stacked vertical apartments or move into other suburbs where there was more suitable living, or into nursing facilities or assisted living, which they really didn't need. We all know that the baby boomers are aging, and I'm part of that population. And as they age, they need somewhere to go and stay in their community. So Newport Square was that concept. The idea was single-family residential units that live just like home, meaning driveways where they could park their cars, garages where they could, they're used to pulling in, and not having keys for the house. They use their garage door opener, like many of us do. Having ranch-style living that was accessible, meeting ADA code, meeting fair housing guidelines, really meeting and to a degree superseding every building code known to make it so that as people come in, they can stay there, hopefully for the rest of their life. A really neat feature of this property, which was finished 9 years ago, is over 70% of our original residents are still in place. The ones who have left because of attrition. They've either needed more attentive care, or unfortunately some of them have passed away. But we have very, very little turnover. And that key element of very little turnover is one of the just strong points of Newport Square, because it's a community that stays within the community, and the residents stay for a very long time. Where in a typical apartment community, they turn over by 35 to 50% a year. Newport turns over about 2 or 3%. So,
let me give a little more, and if you look in your books, to give you a little bit of an idea of where this all began. I guess I better step back over here a sec. Where this began, when we started the Newport project back 10 years ago, we were handed by, as Jonathan says, then Congresswoman Stephanie Tubbs Jones and Marcia Fudge, a Brookings Institute study that had been done. And the Brookings Institute study was very interesting because basically what it said is that baby boomers were all going to be retiring in about the next 30 years. And the statistics are pretty startling because what it says is by the year 2030, there's going to be over 70 million retired baby boomers in the United States. 1 in every 5 Americans will be a retired baby boomers. That demographic group controls more income than any other demographic group in the United States. And as the study went on, what they found is many communities had looked ahead and they had seen this trend coming, that there were going to be all these retired baby boomers. And what they had focused their attention on at that point was healthcare. How are we going to provide healthcare for these baby boomers? The Brookings Institute study went on to say what they really hadn't looked at was where are we going to keep these people? Where are we going to put them as they grow older? And so at that point they sort of had done a study within a study, and they looked specifically at the Midwest and first suburbs, those suburbs that had grown up around the main urban areas, to say where are these people going to go and where do they want to go. And so they did some research, and what they concluded in the research is that overwhelmingly, these people had expressed an interest in staying in the communities where they had grown up and raised their families. They wanted to age in place. And yet, despite that, there were very few places for them to go. They might not have wanted to stay in the homes where they raised their families because the homes might have been too big for them at this point. The maintenance of responsibility might have been more than they wanted to continue. It might have been 2 floors and they wanted to be on 1 floor now. So their options were at that point that they could either move into a nursing facility or an assisted care facility, which most did not need because, as we all know, 60 is the new 40, at least that's what I'm telling people. And as a result of that, they're active, healthy people, and they didn't need to go into those facilities. Or their choices were to move into stacked living, which was not what they had grown up with, not what they were accustomed to. They were used to bungalow-style living. Or they could move out into the suburbs further, where they might be able to get something smaller, not usually what they had grown accustomed to, but there wasn't any place for them within their own community to stay. That's from which Newport was born. The concept was to create essentially a community within a community, where these people would be able to find a spot and create a new neighborhood, really, and that's what these are like. These are new neighborhoods. If you take a look at the book with the pictures that we gave you, Jonathan, I'm going to let you narrate a little bit because you're familiar.
Sure. We have our groundbreaking, which was an exciting event for us, and we've been studying this property now for 8 years since we put the first one in. We've been interviewing our residents, and our new generation unit took into account we didn't do everything perfectly. We did lots of things good, but we made our mistakes. But we've corrected and made these units. The new unit that we propose is 1,400 square feet, not 1,100 square feet. And as you can see from the pictures, it creates a nice facade, high quality improvements that we're very proud of, and we hope is a spark plug for a community to really other development. We maintain these properties in-house. We manage these properties in-house. There is on-site maintenance 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, because seniors demand that type of service. Sometimes they like people to come in after they come home. Sometimes a problem happens in the middle of the night. They want to be taken care of. We understand that we are in the service business, And our goal is to keep those residents in place for as long as possible. Because the strategy really is, the units turning over is a contra revenue situation for us. It costs money to turn over a unit. And having people stay in place is very helpful. And we're all about keeping that population in place.
Tying in with that, one of the unique features about Newport Square, and because we've been able to keep turnover so very low, is that, and I'm not sure there's anyone else who is doing this, and those who are in the standard market rate rental market would tell us we're crazy. When you move into Newport Square, what you pay in rent on the day you move in is what you pay for as long as you live there. Your rent does not ever go up. And we're able to do that because we keep our people. We recognize, as Jonathan said, this is a service business. Once you're there, our job is to keep you happy. We talk about this in these terms, and we say, this is good for the community, and it is good for the community. It's good for the folks who live there, and it is good for the folks who live there. But we make no bones, it's good for us too. We're in business to make a profit. That's what we want to do. But we recognize that the way we make a profit is by keeping people happy and in their suites. As long as they're there, they're paying rent, we're doing well. So our job is to serve that population and to serve it better than anybody else serves it. And I think, as Jonathan pointed out, what attests to the fact that we're doing that well is that we very rarely have someone move out on their own volition. When we started to build the first Newport, before we put a shovel in the ground, we were full with a waiting list. We have remained full with a waiting list throughout the entire time Newport has existed. The longest period of time we've had a vacancy is 14 days, which is usually when we lose a resident and it takes that time to turn the suite for the next resident. The communities tend to be our best marketing agents. In fact, when we went into the Warrensville Newport, they demanded that their residents, Warrensville Heights residents, have first crack, and that before we could rent suites, they wanted the ability to have their residents have the first crack at them. And they do, to this day. They have, if we have a vacancy and there's no one on the waiting list, and that's rare, we tell the community and they are instantly rented. So we have a very collaborative relationship with communities we work in. When Jonathan and I talked about this, we're really very different than I think most developers do things. Most developers, what they do is they go into a community, they identify a piece of property that they like, they come to council and they say, this is the property we like, this is what we want to do with it, rezone it for us, or do what we need you to do. We come into communities and we say, this is what we do. This is Newport Square is what we do. Tell us, is this something you think your community can use? Because if your community can use it, then we can talk about the next things. But if you're not interested in it, knock on wood, we've not yet walked into a community that has said that, but someday I'm sure we will. We only want to be in communities where we're wanted. Fortunately, right now there are many communities who want us and that we're working with, and so we don't have to have an issue with that. But we want to work with you collaboratively. We don't want to dictate to you. We don't want to tell you what you should or shouldn't do. We want you know your communities better than we know them. We think we know them pretty well because we do our homework before we go someplace. But certainly you're here every day. You're in touch with your constituents. You know what they need, what they want. We want you to tell us what you need so we can help. And that's how we've designed these units and how we've designed the service that we provide. So we're unique in that way. We're also kind of unique in the way that the trend in real estate is to build up. You can make a lot more money when you build up. You can stack 2, 3, 4, 5 on top of each other. We are a relatively inefficient use of real estate. We do one story. And they're 1,400 square feet, and they're large, and they're open, and they're spacious. We have 9 and 10-foot ceilings. The floor plans, when you walk in, they're very open. We made some changes since we built our first ones. We initially had built a hallway, and when we looked at it, we thought, this hallway's a little narrow. When you walk in, it looks a little too narrow. So we widened the hallway, not only because we wanted it to read better, but we recognized there are people who have walkers and wheelchairs, and that sometimes they need a little bit wider space, so we built them wider. When you walk in, you'll walk into a kitchen. It's off to the right, which has granite countertops and beautiful wood cabinets, flat top appliances. We want, when people move into our places, to move into a place that's as good or better than they came from. Jonathan always says, I'm stealing all your lines here, I apologize. Jonathan always says, you know, people don't work their whole lives to go someplace worse when they retire. And we want them to feel like they're moving into new, beautiful, and something that they can be proud of.
Two things.
Sure.
That, when we first chatted, you had also mentioned that you were the sole management for everything.
Yes.
So you don't turn this over to a management company.
We don't. We do it ourselves.
Right. And then the second thing was some of the folks here are not familiar with the site.
We'd be more than happy to tour you. We'd love to take you out there and have you look at it, walk you. We actually have to, we have a resident manager on site. We have to use his suite right now because there are no available suites, but he's fortunately very kind. He lets us go in his suite whenever we tour community leaders. So we'd be more than happy whenever you'd like to take you out, have you take a look and see them. And as I said, we've made some improvements and some changes since we built these. But these will give you a pretty good idea of what we're doing.
Yes.
I'm going to prepare you guys about 7 or 8 questions.
How about one?
Jump in.
Are you serious?
Yes, I'm serious. How about one?
Then I'll talk to you guys later
Well,
today.
No, do
No,
one.
that's fine.
Do one so other people have an opportunity, okay?
I don't know what your time frame is, but
1,400 square feet would allow how many units on the land that you're looking for in Maple Heights? That would be the first question.
we do about 10 per acre, 10 units per acre.
The amount of land that we have available is about how many?
Well, it varies.
I know you're looking at this.
Yes, at various times that we've talked, it's ranged anywhere from 20-some acres to 40-some acres. And what we have talked about, and I guess back up a minute, I started by speaking to Leslie Gambosi, your community development director.
Mm-hmm.
She started the conversation with me, took it to Mayor Lansky, came back and said this is something that the community would be interested in. We then had several conversations about different locations within the city. This was the one that the city said we think this would be the best place, the ideal place for you. And we agreed. We thought it looked like a particularly good place to be. And then at various times they've talked about different numbers of acres. What our plan would be, and we talked to your senior director too in one of our early meetings with Leslie. We had a conversation and we explained what our product was, and we were told, we can probably I can probably give you the names of the people who will fill out your first 100 units. So our goal would be to do this in phases, to put up a first phase of roughly 100 units, see how we do, and make sure that we fill them all up, which I think based upon your population, demographics of the community, and what other product you have for those folks. I don't think that would be very challenging to fill, and then move into another phase and slowly grow the project until such time as we've satisfied the need in the community.
Are there any other questions for the gentleman?
Madam Chair,
Go ahead. Yes.
now in each unit, thanks for thinking about the wide hallways, because that is a big concern to senior. Is the bathrooms handicap accessible?
All of them, yes.
All of them.
Thank you.
And as we've talked about, Jonathan talked about, we basically have had a focus group, a study group in Warrensville Heights for the last years as we've refined this concept. And we've asked our residents, tell us what you like and what you don't like, because we'll modify.
Let me take a step further. The ADA and the Fair Housing Guidelines aren't really followed, as many of you know. They're not followed in municipal buildings, they're not followed in most building codes. Rolled curbs don't meet ADA. 12-to-1 slopes don't meet ADA. We've learned this. Now, we made some of those mistakes on that property, but what we've done is we've actually hired the best consultants in accessibility to help us. A guy named John Picard, who is the kind of most knowledgeable person in accessibility. So how do you really find out? You watch a resident in a wheelchair get through your unit. Because just because you have that little 60-inch turning circle doesn't mean anything if there's an impediment. So we've checked, and we'll continue to recheck because we want it so that our residents can stay in place.
The other, just one more thing, the other interesting thing is that the architect who helped design these plans for us, how old is Jerry?
But somebody who's over 75, and that everybody stop counting. But
But one of the things that we learned as we talked to him, because he's an individual who has some of the same issues and concerns as our residents do, is, we're talking about in the kitchen, are you going to build something that's a breakfast bar with high stools? Are you going to? And he said, you don't ever do that. He said, you can't put a breakfast bar in there because as people get older, they're a little less steady and they don't want to be that high, or they don't want to take that chance. It's not only that, but our generation grew up with tables in the kitchen. We eat in the kitchen. The dining room is for good occasions, not when you eat every day. So
our kitchen is big enough to.
We learned.
Yeah, we've listened very, very carefully. It's hard to find an architect who has 2 prosthetic hips, but we did.
So, and that's, as I say, part of what we, to the extent that we are a service organization, and that's what we look at ourselves after we build these, we're a service organization. You've got to be responsive to the needs of your residents. How do you learn what they need? You listen. You've got to listen to them. One of the things that we learned is that people who are 55 and older don't like people walking through their houses when they're not there. So if we have to get into the hot water tank, all of it's accessible. It's all in the garage. So we can service these things without ever entering the unit. It's just those kinds of things. We found, one of the things, I'm going to steal your thunder again, Tom, about mailboxes and garbage toters.
So you move into a new community, how do you meet people? Because it's like going to college, it's like going to camp. So what you do is, I'll tell you what we don't do first. Lots of apartment communities have a dumpster that you have to take your stuff to your dumpster. I don't think that you work hard your whole life for the privilege of putting your garbage in the back of your car and driving to a dumpster. We have toters that you roll to the curb just like you do now that are picked up. If a senior is unable to, or a resident is unable to, our staff will do that for you, but there's a reason we find. Our seniors all roll out their toters at the same time because it's a hello point. What's going on? We put our mailboxes in clusters underneath our light posts because unfortunately in the winter it gets dark pretty early. So when you get home, and lots of our seniors are still in the workforce, they want to be able to go get their mail, but you find out that everyone goes and gets their mail about 5:30. And the reason
It's a logical experiment.
yeah, because you want to say hello, because you become part of the community, but what's the subject? Did you get your paper? Did you not get your paper? Did you get your check? Got the check. So that's really, really important. So we pay attention. You'll see some pictures in the book of a gazebo area. People go out there, they take their grandkids out there. It's just so that people can meet, become friends, become part of a community. We don't want people living in little silos, even though people do want their privacy. They do want their own front door. They want their own patio. They want their own flower beds where they can plant their own stuff, where they can put a vegetable garden in the back, where they can put their own annuals or perennials in the front, because that's what makes it their home. Down to that we've included an electrical outlet out by the front, and we plant pine trees so that they can decorate a Christmas tree, because that's what they had in their home. And again, this is their home. If you have someone who moves in at 55 and they're blessed with a long life, they could be there 45 more years, and we're okay with that.
Alex?
I was at one of these homes out in Westlake, Ohio, and they had a cluster house like this. Guy across the street moved in one, it was beautiful, it was up. Out in the main area, setting hall, they had a lodge type place built where the residents could come and gather, it was enclosed, and they could rent it, and if not rent it, on availability, they could get it for christenings, small for a wedding and that. Something like that, a gathering room. Any plans?
We do not have that kind of amenity. We actually have studied them and we've looked at them, and there are a couple of issues with them. One is that obviously there's a cost involved in it. Our goal is, we are a market rent community. We do not subsidize, we're not tax credit, we are market rent. But we also recognize our market rent has to be reasonable. We have to be able to, people who want to live there have to be able to afford to live there. And we also know once they live there, they're never getting a rent increase. So we have to be careful about those kinds of things. We also don't want to duplicate the services that are offered in the community. And in your community, you're blessed to have a lot of very good services that are being offered for seniors. So we're not trying to duplicate what you do. What we're trying to do is offer something very much like they have if they were to move out of their neighborhood where they are now into a new neighborhood.
Yes, that was an upscale.
Yes.
Probably double than what you charge.
You have questions?
Yeah, good evening, gentlemen. I do have a question. You describe this as a community within a community, so is this, per se, a gated community, or is it for when residents that live in this community?
The roadways are private, they're maintained privately. We don't dedicate them to the city, though we build them to municipal standards, with the exception of curbing, because we have rolled curbs, and we found that most municipal streets don't meet the American with Disabilities Act. You have a curb, think about it, it's an impediment to get through. But with that exception, they're built to municipal standards. In Warrensville Heights, working with the community, they thought that a gated community was desirable. Again, this is where we can collaborate with you. If you think that a gated community provides value or safety and limited access that's desirable for this population, we're great with that. If you decide that this is an amenity that you either find inappropriate, we're okay with that as well. Our goal is to create a place where people feel safe. I will tell you that our fences that we put, and look, fences and gated openings, if you really want to get through them, there's certainly ways to do that. They're more for aesthetics and creating an enclave and sight vistas and limited sight lines, because you can't always control what's outside your gates. But that's an issue that we'd love to work with you on.
We've also found, by the way, that in the one that we have, our current site in Warrensville, it backs up against a Kentucky Fried Chicken, a McDonald's, and a CVS, and the residents who have the ones in the back took the planks out of the fence because it's easier to go right through there to get to the CVS or the McDonald's. So it's gated. It's a gated community until they ungate it.
Special access.
Special access. Exactly. Special pass.
Thank you, gentlemen. What we would like to do is start the process, and in order to do that, we would have to entertain a motion to present your ideas to the planning and zoning, and that's where you actually begin the process.
Sure.
So, and I'm sure you're familiar with that. So if at this point we could do that, have a motion to present the idea of Newport Square to planning and zoning.
Wouldn't the site control first, Madam Chair?
That would come with planning and zoning, actually.
Madam Chair, did you tell the audience and council where you plan on this site? Everybody's calling me, asking where you're going to go in off the road.
I think the council president has a diagram which certainly can be shared with you and would be happy
This is
to.
a color one. You also have one in your packet. And John, do you have more?
Well, somebody doesn't have one.
Just familiar with those? Yeah, it's easier.
Yeah.
These are from
Google.
Right, those are Google Earth.
Google
ones, and I
Earth.
think there's also drawings that you have as
Oh,
well.
right. No, this is for the
Just make sure this
yeah,
is
yeah.
who you're talking to, just to make sure.
Good.
Great, thank you.
Is that correct?
That's
That's correct.
So you have, you could tell us which one.
Well, there's two parcels that were contiguous. One was 27 acres, and then there was another parcel that was contiguous to it. Right now, it was the 27-acre parcel was the last parcel that we're talking about with Leslie.
You have that from Leslie. Could you ID it on
Yeah.
this one? It's a little bit easier.
I think it would be page 19 on the parcel map, if that helps you.
Page 19 has
It's
number
right- it's
1
right- it's
on
right-
there.
it's right
The
there.
second one.
Yeah, the number one.
The number one?
The number one.
There's 21 minutes.
That's correct. That's correct.
Okay, everyone should have that. Okay. We have a request for, we have a, I'm sorry, what is that?
If we're going to entertain a motion, actually move this forward, I would have a couple extra questions, if that's the intent.
I'm happy to answer anybody's questions if you have time.
Go ahead.
How many of these do you have? And these,
At this moment, we have the one that we built in Warrensville Heights. We're currently in talks with about a half a dozen other communities. We actually studied this for almost 9 years before rolling out the second one. And now our goal is to start to build many of these. And we're actually talking about a half a dozen other. We do these only in first suburbs. It's the only place we want to do them. That's part of our plan. And so we are, at this moment, talking to about a half dozen other suburbs, and we're at various stages. Some are in the stages of they're ready to approve, some are in the stages of we're right at the beginning of talking about where's a good site.
So you have the one in Warrensville Heights, so do you have a second one?
No, this would be a second one unless one of the ones that we're working on now comes sooner. And we have the capability, we're all funded internally, so it's not that we have to go out and get any money. As soon as we get approvals, we're ready to go and build them. And so we're in various stages. As I say, there are a couple of other communities that are pretty far along in the process right now, so those might come up first, depending upon how long we are in this process. But we can build, I think we talked about being able to build 3, 4 of them at a time without any issue.
And the length to develop, the length of time it would take to develop this?
For a 100-unit phase, it's about a year.
About a year, okay. In your experience so far, what have been the impacts on the community, like in Warrensville Heights? What kind of impacts did you see?
I would say the best thing you can do is pick up the phone and call Mayor Sellers. Ask him.
I will tell you that there's 72 very happy households that have been brought into the community or remained in the community who have a special place to live. It's a very, very strong campaign spot for either the councilman in that ward or for the mayor, because they're happy folks.
And to that end, Warrensville Heights is about to give us our second site if they want us to build more.
The other thing that I will tell you is it was a spark plug in housing. We were the first new multifamily housing project in Warrensville Heights when we started in about 30 years. There then became homes that came up on Emory Road, closer to Richmond, that were developed. There were homes that came up off of Emory Road, just to the east of Richmond Road, across from what used to be the Shaker Racket Club, if anyone knows that area. So it was really quite a spark plug of residential development, because I think what we said to the development world is, this is a fine community, we're putting equity in this community, the residents are coming in, they are paying rent, they are happy. You know, sometimes you get in a lull and you need a spark plug. And someone puts up 100 new units, you know, a lot of what people judge communities by are how many housing starts. So all of a sudden you have 100 housing starts. That kind of validates this is a good place and people are moving in.
Do we have a,
I'm sorry, Madam Chair. I had 2 more questions.
we also had Tony who had several questions.
She's
Could you
free to ask hers as
possibly
well.
limit yourself to just one?
I was wondering the percentage of, within the ones you have in Warrensville Heights, what percentage of your residents were residents of the city already that moved in, of the surrounding neighborhood?
The vast majority.
The vast majority.
What we did when we made our original list is we did it through the senior center. They kept the list for us because people wanted to come in and we wanted to be good fiduciaries of the city, and so we let them keep the list. So they were selective about taking care of people within their own community. And I think there may be a few that are from outside Warrensville Heights, but I would tell you the large majority is from within the
90+%.
What percentage of your residents have vehicles?
100%.
100%?
100%.
Okay. And how large is your one in
72 units.
72 units? Okay. And there's one entrance?
There's one entrance and there are 2 exits.
Okay.
Because obviously, in case of an emergency, you want to have a second point of egress. And of course, an emergency vehicle can get in there for entrance as well.
Will there be multiple entrances to this one?
Always.
Okay. Because I thought I only saw one section of frontage.
In terms of,
Let me relook.
This will all be probably laid out in planning and zoning, so it would probably be a good idea to be in attendance at those meetings.
Because yeah, I only see one frontage for the 27-acre lot.
something we obviously, you're right, as it sits now, the question is, can we develop extra entrances, more egress and ingress? And that's, again, this is something we try to do collaboratively with the community when they tell us this is how we'd like to see it laid out. We work with them.
And that's a good thought. And what we may do then is make it a double boulevard, again, because you need to have an unobstructed entrance in case of who knows what. So obviously, we know that we have to get approved by fire department, as well as planning and zoning, so.
Okay, we still have a motion, or a request for a motion. A second, please.
I didn't get the full need the motion.
I do.
Okay. We need a second.
Please. Alex?
I don't believe you can make a motion, Madam Chair. Can you make a motion like that?
I can't make a motion.
Okay, that's fine. Just asking.
Let's call the roll.
Call the roll, please.
Adams?
This motion is for?
To present this concept to planning and zoning. This is the initial step. This is what they would have to go through in order to
It's in the
actually
charter.
begin.
It's in the charter.
It's in our charter.
Madam Chair, will we entertain discussion on the motion, please?
We're ready to call the roll.
Would we entertain discussion? I prefer we have
Motion,
discussion
no,
as there
we're going to
normally
call the
is
roll.
before a motion.
We're going to call the roll, Mr. Brown.
Madam Chair, then I have to appeal your decision to forego discussion, and we can put it before the members of council and see whether they'd like to entertain discussion.
Madam Chair, who made the motion?
I did.
I think you should see if there's a motion from the other members.
We can.
I think that'd be the better approach.
Go ahead.
Well, we have Mr. Adams who'd like to make a motion.
Go ahead.
Second. Ms. Jones.
Now call the roll, please.
Madam Chair, I would like to entertain discussion. As I said previously, I would like to appeal your decision and place before the members of council to entertain discussion instead of foregoing it.
I don't hear it.
Is there a second to this motion?
No, there is not.
I don't believe there's second necessary for a second as it reads in the
Yes, there
codified
is.
ordinances.
Yes, there is.
Oh, I actually have them right here, so we can take a look then.
Would you call the roll, please?
Madam Chair, point of order, Madam Chair, I think we should check.
Adams?
Yes.
Jones?
Yes.
Jackson?
No.
Brownlee?
No.
Trojansky?
Yes.
Agee?
Yes.
Motion passed.
Motion passed. So your next step will be to appear to planning and
We'll be
zoning.
happy to remain afterwards to answer any other questions anyone might have.
And likewise, our business cards are with you,
Yes, you can.
and we'd be delighted to meet and speak with you at your schedule.
And I'm going to encourage you, if you want to take a tour of the existing property, I'm more than happy to arrange to take you out there and let you look.
Good. Thank you
Thank
so
you all
much.
so much.
Thank you.
We'll wait.
One comment is I'll be contacting you with
Thanks.
the information and the application that you need.
Perfect.
Okay.
We appreciate it. Thank you.